We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Are you ready to learn the 3 secrets to launching a successful podcast? Hi, I'm Bill, a recent client of the Podcast Mogul. If you've been thinking about starting a podcast but aren't sure where to begin, he's got you covered. He is hosting a free webinar where he will share the 3 secrets that can help you launch, grow, and monetize your podcast without any fancy equipment or technical headaches. Click the link in the show notes to save your spot now and let him help get your podcast off the ground.
Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast.
Hello, wonderful listeners, and welcome back to another enlightening episode of Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I am Phil Better, your guide in the realm of entrepreneurship, aka the Podcast Mogul. And today's episode promises to be nothing short of exceptional. Our guest today is a true luminary in the creative tech industry, bringing more than 2 decades of invaluable expertise to the table. As president and founder of LeFort Talent Group, our guest has not only witnessed but actively contributed to the evolution of this dynamic sector. They've developed an unparalleled understanding of the talent needed and challenges that define the landscape. Now, at LeFort Talent Group, our guest isn't just leading a team of specialists. No, they're orchestrating a symphony of talent, connecting unexceptional campaigns with exceptional companies with top-tier professionals in digital entertainment, communications, marketing, operations, and of course, HR. They go beyond the conventional boundaries of recruiters. They are consultants, business builders, deal makers, and strategic partners to their clients and candidates. Their mission is clear: to help talent thrive and businesses grow in the creative tech industry. And the results they deliver speak volumes, closing most positions within 4 to 6 weeks and successfully facilitating multiple investments and partnerships for their clients. So without further ado, let's dive into the wealth of knowledge our guest brings to the table. Please join me in welcoming the president and founder of LeFort Talent Group, the one and only Lance LeFort.
Phil, thank you very much for the introduction. Sounds great. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here, Lance. I can't thank you enough. When I got your email about you wanting to be on the show, I was like, yes, let's get Lance on the podcast because he is, like I said, a wealth of information, that I want to dive into. But of course, I want to know, why did you become an entrepreneur? What was it that made you jump into this world of entrepreneurship, specifically the digital world, the creative digital?
Yeah, Phil, I think some of it probably stems from being very young. I grew up in a household where my mother was an entrepreneur. She ran a very successful and very busy business. And so I think it was in the genes, in the DNA. And I think that might have been the start of it, but also just there's a restlessness, I think, in some entrepreneurs where they want to do more. They don't want to fit always into a big company and just be a cog in the wheel. There's an ambition to do, to be a leader, to be managing things. And so that's probably primarily where all of this started, was just, I want to run the show some days. I don't want to be the second and third in command. I want to be the president. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Was LeFort or the LeFort, excuse my pronunciation, I'm French, so I'll say it in French. But
right.
Was this your first foray into the world of entrepreneurship, or were there previous exploitations?
No, I think even in my teens and 20s, I always was running some side business. And as I got older, they got a little larger, and I ran a franchise for a couple of years for a company. And even after graduating university and college, I was freelancing a lot. So if I couldn't find one full-time job, I'd have 4 or 5, and I'd be billing clients and doing work for them. And so again, I think it's kind of like just part of my character, or sort of maybe the environment I was around, but I was always hustling, doing 3 or 4 or 5 things. I find it quite funny when I bump into a friend that I haven't seen in a long time, somebody let's say from high school or college, and they say, "What have you been doing lately?" And I start into a list, and they go, "Oh my goodness, you haven't changed a bit," So, but it is again one of these ambitions to, drive things, and I think part of it too is I've had jobs in large corporations, and I get frustrated with the shortcomings, or sometimes there's a lot of potential in a company, but it can't get realized for a number of factors, whether it be management team structure, paradigms they've bought into and they can't change quickly, personalities, egos. There's so many things that make up the fiber of the fabric of a company, and tearing those or disrupting them. So we've seen in the last 10 or so years where these companies come along and completely upend a whole ecosystem. Like, I think of Uber as an example, or, back in the day, it was Napster upsetting the whole way music is distributed. And so, it's more rapid today than we've ever seen, the disruption of traditional services. So for myself, I really, I like being in the room with 10 or 12 really smart minds. But when one of them is making 3 or 4 times the amount of money everyone else is, yet that person's not the smartest person in the room, that kind of rattles my cage a little bit, right? I'm thinking, wait, we're the ones delivering all the value here, and this person's getting compensated. So anyways, I like to run my own show. I also, just as an entrepreneur, I don't like somebody saying, you're 5 minutes late to work this morning. Those sort of minor grievances pile up, and I just think, well, yeah, but if I'm going to stay till 8, 9, or 10 o'clock tonight working on stuff, what does it matter what time I start? But so it's that kind of, those sort of positions sometimes. And I've worked in human resources, right? And sometimes an HR manager will come and say, like, I want to look at the absenteeism, and I want to look at, the tardiness or whatever. And I just say, hey, why don't we focus on the engagement of the people that are here? Because there's a term in HR called presenteeism. They're present, but they're not doing anything. They might as well not be here. They're playing games, they're hiding, they're, at the water cooler, or in the stairwell or the bathroom, or they've got 25 smoke breaks or whatever the distractions are. Some employees are underperforming. I'd rather find a way to get that underperforming employee to perform more, to engage more, or, sometimes just get them out of the business. Like, if they're not engaged, don't hang on to these people, because they're sucking energy and life from others and from the company. So it's those sort of things where I don't want to focus on the, I literally remember an executive coming and saying, hey, I heard a rumor that whenever there's a holiday Monday, a lot of people call in sick on the Friday. So it seems like we have an awful lot of sick Fridays, or the reverse. If it's a holiday Friday, everyone calls on sick on Monday. And I said, yeah, well, that's kind of human behavior, And no, but I'd like to track it, and I'd like to find out who's doing it, and I'd like to run a report, and I'd like to build a policy. And I said, no problem. We will do the homework. We'll get it done for you. We'll find out who the prime offenders are. And you'll never guess, Phil, who the prime offender out of a company of about 700 people was.
I want to say the CEO.
Yeah, the person asking for the report was the prime offender. And when I brought that information forward, that individual said, yeah, let's skip that policy. Let's just forget about that. So, it's sort of, what you want to do is get high performance out of people when they're in the office or when they're supposed to be working. But I think people are people. You still need to know that they need to have a break, and they need to have pressure valves, and they're humans. Things happen in their lives, Another executive I talked to a couple summers ago said her whole mandate was to be able to take 2 weeks off and not touch her phone, not check an email for 2 weeks. And she said, you have to build a culture around you of people that support all your functions, so that well before you leave, they're already doing portions of your work, and they're involved collaboratively in what you're doing. And so she said, I would coach everyone around me to do the exact same thing. And she said, I would tell them, you will be scored negatively in my world if I find out on vacation you've checked an email. So she said, I had to make it a threat for them as well, because she said, all of them said, no, but we can't do that. We've never done that before. And she said, I know, but that's the problem. You're not having a work-life balance. You're not actually tapping out and enjoying your vacation because you're still digitally leashed to the business. So she said, I would threaten them. I would say, this will go badly against you in your review at the end of the year. This will go badly when you want to raise. She said, our whole job here is to create a culture where we are replaceable, but we're probably not going to replace each other if everybody's going well, right? If everything's going well for the company. So I was amazed to hear it, like she actually formalized it and said, because she said most people can't unwind in 5 days. They need 10 at least. And so she said they're never going to unwind if they're checking things. And then when they come back, they're not really rested. So she said, I want to build a culture where people actually work hard and play hard and actually tap out, unplug, and recharge. So I found that, really interesting, because people talk the talk, but she actually made it, walk the walk. She made it happen, and she did it herself. So I thought that was really interesting as a sort of a work-life balance thing, because a lot of people burn themselves out. They really do.
Oh yeah.
And
I'm a sufferer from burnout from 2020 at the beginning,
Right.
so I fully understand that. Lance, I was wondering, how did LeFort Talent Group come to be? How did you go into this type of world of slightly recruiting, but more than just a recruitment company?
Yeah, so I've been, my whole career, about roughly 30 years, has been in creative industries. So advertising, marketing, display marketing. Years ago, I was an artist. I started as an artist. I used to work for magazines and lay out things that I could illustrate and draw on. So I have a fine art degree from way, way back. But I found myself, again, this entrepreneurial thing nagging at me. I wanted to run the studio, right? I was often like, hey, can you manage this group of artists, right? So it started like that. And then at some point in my career, I want to say somewhere in my 30s, recruiters started calling me and offering me sales jobs and marketing jobs at other places. And I thought, what are these things, recruiters? I didn't even understand what it was at first. I'm like, what is this person doing? This like an agent or something. So I started asking questions. And funny enough, I got in to see a very senior executive search owner. And he kept trying to push a job on me. And I just said, look, I'm not going. I'm not interested. And he said, could you just do me a favor? Like, this guy's seen your profile and really wants to hire you, really wants to interview you. Go meet him. And he said, after that, I'll back off. I'll leave you alone. I said, fine, I'll just go see the guy. So I saw him. We had a good meeting. And then this recruiter said, you got to come back in my office and talk to me. And I said, no, I can talk to you on the phone. He goes, no, I really want to chat with you about another opportunity. And I'm like, oh. Anyways, I went in to see him, and he said, you know what you are? You're kind of creative, but you're also a suit. You're like and you're in between two kind of channels. And he said, you know what I need right now? I need a creative recruiter. I need a person that understands how creative people think, but who can put it into a business context. And so he said, I recruit for account executives and managers at big ad agencies and marketing firms. And he said, when they say, can you do creative? I can't. I don't understand how you guys think. But he said, you do. You instinctively are one. So he said, if you'd like, I'd love to hire you as a creative recruiter. And in my mind, I was like, wait, recruiters, I don't really understand what you guys are yet. I'm like, anyway, so I said to him, can you explain what you do? And he said, yeah, I'm kind of like a real estate agent. I want you to sell your house 3 or 4 times in your life, so I'll make a commission off it. But I don't want to annoy you so much that you never call me. And I also want you to refer friends to me. He said, if I'm doing that thing right, I will make a lot of money. I'll be very busy. But he said, basically, you're going to move jobs 3, 4, 5 times in your life. And if I'm the broker or the facilitator that helps you do it to a better place, better money, better career opportunity, you're going to thank me. You're going to remember me. You're going to refer me. And he said, that's all we do. I thought, interesting. And he said, the other thing is you're going to meet all sorts of people in ad agencies, and that's really where you want to be right now. So he said, this is kind of a intro into the climate, the culture, the ecosystem of ad agencies and marketing firms. So I I jumped on. We did it for about 5 years. I really enjoyed it. Um, I enjoyed it for a while. Then I got a job being a talent manager at a video game studio. And that actually for me was like the perfect position. Like I am a gamer. I love playing video games. All of a sudden I'm in a place where we're producing video games. And I thought, oh, we just won the lottery. This is it, you know? So I did that for a while. Sadly, those guys ran into some money trouble. I then bounced into animation, visual effects, AR, VR. I worked client side at a bunch of studios, helping staff up big movies like we do. Sometimes we'd hire 500 or 600 people in 1 year with the team of recruiters underneath. But again, I got kind of tired of the corporate end of the hall sometimes because people on the floor just want to produce the next movie, kids show, game, whatever. But down the other end of the hall, there's a whole different kind of metrics at play. And while I could play them, I really wanted to get back to work. I just wanted to place good people, move companies forward. So I had friends in the industry calling me saying, can you find me X? Can you find me Y? I need a senior animator. I need an animation director. And I said, hey guys, I got a job. I can't moonlight. But I got to a crossroads where I just said, a good friend of mine called and said, I need this position filled right away and I'd love to pay you for it. And so we started discussing a fee. And I was at a startup at the time, very sort of, I don't know if you've ever been at a startup, but it's all hands on deck 7 days a week for months and months. And it wasn't a good fit. So luckily, just fortuitously, this friend said, I will pay you X number of dollars to do the search. I started it, and then it was like a light bulb, just like, oh, I can do this. And the funny part was friends that saw me starting my own business said, dude, you were right for this 10 years ago. You should have done it 10 years ago. But I still felt, Phil, that I had to get more experience. Mm-hmm. And I went through companies going bankrupt and staffing up companies. I've personally had to close down companies for others. They'd hire me to say, we're going to fire 400, 500, 600 people. Can you do that in the US and Canada and overseas? And so there's a George Clooney movie. I think it's called Up in the Clouds or something like that.
Oh yeah. I love that movie. It's such a great movie. Like it's a horrible, like his job is horrible. Yeah. But like, I like the movie because it's also engaging in the future and that. So yeah.
Yeah, so friends of mine were saying, you're that George Clooney character. I said, no. I do lots of things, lots of different things. So, I've been invited by management teams sometimes to look at a problem, and then I start dissecting it and breaking it down forensically and sort of saying, okay, where's the latency? Where do we get stuck in the workflows? And can we eliminate some of the steps? Or do we need to add a couple meetings in to inform the process and catch it quicker? Because sometimes I find, well, we do that meeting once a month. I'm like, okay, well, what gets discussed? Anything gets delayed, that gets delayed another several weeks. Why don't we start doing a bi-weekly meeting instead of monthly meeting? Why don't we get a coordinator start tracking these elements? So sometimes I just find there's a little bit of chaos, and I like getting in there and sort of tightening it up for people. Mm-hmm. Also, if the company's gone through rapid growth, like many of our clients are 50 to 100 people, and sometimes by the time we're done, they're 200 or 300 people. Processes change, people change, systems have to be put in place that weren't there before. And so I like to look at those at the beginning and draw out a roadmap. At some point, you're going to need to add the following bodies, following software, following meetings. So we look at operationally a business that is going through rapid change. The people that have been running it at 50, 60, 100 staff, have got acclimatized to the company being that size, and they've got into habits and routines. And if it blows up quickly to 200 or 300 or 400 people, they're not ready for that. So part of that consulting part of what we do is to get in there and say, hey, let's build a couple of visual roadmaps here. Let's look at potentially what we're going to have to do. A perfect example, somebody onboarding at a small company, they get brought into the knitting, so to speak, quickly. They go out with their supervisor, maybe the first week for lunch, they meet the team, all that sort of stuff. But I've been at places where we're adding 70 to 100 people a month. Now, the onboarding to manage that versus the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 hires at the other scenario, completely different, right? You now have a machine. You're ingesting 50, 60, 100 people. They have to go through like boot camp, through a quick sort of routine. Could be 2 days or 3 days. Otherwise, the amount of chaos you're creating at the company exponentially explodes, right? Every support system now has a bunch of strangers in the building. They're not sure how to sort of work with them. No one knows where this is or that is. So there's a training component. There's a wiki or internal dashboards that you have to build. A lot of people don't read anything anymore. So you have to build videos, make it graphical, make some pictures. But this is all part of, but, make it entertaining even, right? Because it really is, it's daunting. I can remember being in my 20s, starting at a place, and they handed me all these manuals, like a bookshelf full of manuals of products to learn and all this stuff. And I, like an idiot at about 24 years old, I cracked the first manual and thought, I better get going because it's going to take me months, right? And then I met the national sales manager, and he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm reading. He goes, oh, throw those in the garbage. Nobody reads. He said, there's a help desk for that. Just yell at them 4 or 5, 10 times a day and figure out what you need to. He said, you'll osmosis. He said, you'll just pick it up. And he said, better that you meet the clients, better that you find out what their pain points are, better that you look at fixing those first, and you'll learn all the tech stuff along the way. But he said, clients first, get in the car. Let's go meet some clients. Let's hear what they're struggling with. That's more valuable, right? Which was very interesting. That this national sales guy just said, don't get into that. You'll figure out what pages you need to read later, but junk the manuals for now. I'm like, okay. But again, going back to what we're talking about, there are huge differences when a company goes through growth. And I've had to do the other, as I mentioned earlier, I've had to wind down large companies, and there's a process for that as well. And a lot of executive teams don't understand the legal part around that, the employment laws and so on. And there are various things in place that I'm very well versed in because I've dealt with employment lawyers and immigration law and visas, all sorts of stuff on the HR and employment side. And so some executive teams, I've literally had investors just say, you just close that next week. I'm like, you can't do that. It's going to cost you an extra $2.3 million. They're like, what? Yeah, because of the laws in place, we have to shut this place slowly down. And there's a number of strategies to get the job done, but you need to hire a guy like me or somebody like me to figure it out for you and draw that roadmap out. Otherwise, you're going to incur tons of fines and lots of extra severance. And, and the executive teams kind of look at me and blink their eyes. It's like, no, but we need to do this. And I said, no, I get it. You need to do this. But there's a legal and labor framework around it. So things like that, Phil, sometimes, and they're just like, what are you talking? Anyways, I'll just draw 2 scenarios. I can shut it for you next Friday, but here's the cost. Or I can shut it down in 5 months, and here's how we do that. And here's how much money you save. Oh, okay. How much money you save is really what's, do the investors just want to hear that we shut the place down quickly and it costs us an extra couple $1 million, or that we shut it down smoothly and we had no lawsuits? I mean, I've literally had to shut down hundreds and hundreds of people, and we end up with 3 legal challenges out of 500 terminations, which is,
those are great numbers.
Yeah, no, we were, even the CFO was like, dude, wow, and then there was an incoming CFO. He said the same thing. He said, I thought we would have had 40 or 50 people taking a run at us. How did you get it down to 3? And I said, well, that's what I do. Right. So, but we hired a Canadian lawyer and an American lawyer because we were shutting down at 2 different countries. Already knew the framework, but I just wanted them to review everything we were doing. And usually they came back and said, no, that's exactly what we need to do. But as part of the legal sort of compliance internally was we had to have lawyers on board to rubber stamp what we were doing. So anyways, I'm not sure how we got onto that, Phil, but
I love it because it's always an interesting conversation. But coming back to the podcast and the point of it, with Lance, with over 2 decades of experience in the creative tech industry, you've undoubtedly encountered numerous challenges and opportunities. Can you share a pivotal moment where you consciously invested in your own personal and professional development, propelling your journey forward as a leader in the industry?
Sure. Great question. Thank you, Phil. I had been collecting emails in my inbox from a former recruiting business owner who had sold his company, took a couple of years off with the winnings, I guess, from the sale. And then he came back as a coach, and he wanted to coach other recruiting firms on how to scale up. And I remember looking at the emails thinking, these things, they look terrible. There's no sexy graphic design to them at all. They're just a text email. but the content, what he was writing was bang on. This guy knows his stuff, sharp as hell, said all the right things. So one Christmas, I opened a bunch of them and started reading them through because I was on the holidays. I thought I'm just going to look at I'm going to clear out some inboxes basically and some folders. And I started reading this guy's stuff. He had a conference coming in Orlando, Florida. I think it was in January that year. I flew down for the conference. It was like a workshop, about 3 days. And I learned from about 30 other recruiters. And I learned from him, and I signed up for about an 18-month training course with him. It was very expensive. It was like having another mortgage on your house. It was not cheap. But it really opened my mind. It opened my eyes. It expanded my view of being a recruiter and then a business owner. And for me, that was a huge turning point. He also had mindset coaches, like psychologists and stuff, on his team of coaches. And so you would get different coaches during the curriculum. And then once a month, you'd get this mindset call with this therapist, and she'd break down like limiting beliefs, self-limiting beliefs. She'd say, I can never do that. She'd challenge that immediately, right? Or if you'd say, I wish or I hope, she'd be like, cheat on that word. No, you're either going to do it or not do it. You know, it's like you have your Yoda, right? There's no, there's only
do it or not, there is no try.
Exactly. So that really, I felt, sharpened myself as a business person. And he said, one of the things I remember him saying was, he said, I am one of the most coached people you will ever meet. And he said, what I've had to learn in my business is you forget things and fall backwards. And new coaches will tell you something in a different way. So he said, I implore all of you, even if you're not coaching with me, go find other coaches and keep in your life. He said, get coaches for things. Because he said, it's like a conscience. It's like a workout buddy to go to the gym on leg day when you don't want to do leg day. He said, whatever it is, it's somebody else challenging your psychology. If your psychology is to take a rest, it'll ask you why. And maybe you should rest, but maybe there are times when you shouldn't. And maybe there are things where you think, oh, they would never return that phone call. I'm not going to make that phone call. And the coach would say, just make the call, see what happens. Right. And so a little bit of devil's advocate, that sort of thing. But basically teaching you also the metrics we went over, aside from all the emotional sort of paradigms, looking at how many phone calls your company's making, or how many marketing calls, or how many emails, or how are you getting the message out on a business development front as an entrepreneur, right? Because there's so much you can do with word of mouth. I'd say probably 85% of our business is word of mouth. It's referrals all the time. But that 15%, how does that happen? And then if you want to scale a business, you can't rely on the referrals. It's kind of a fixed, almost variable. And so you have to take the 15% and figure out, how do I make that 20, 25, 30%? How do we drive a business engine here with a sales funnel, marketing elements, all that sort of stuff to get our brand into more places and to get on more lists, become a contender somewhere where you weren't before? So that's been for me, going back to your question, that one meeting in Orlando, I felt was like a turbocharged my business and really opened my eyes. And since then, that was like 6 or 7 years ago, I have taken his advice. I've signed up for other courses. I spent a ton of money on different courses to figure out what one coach was teaching and how could I use some of those elements. Lately there's AI courses. I've got other recruiters that are teaching courses, other business owners that are teaching courses. I signed up with another, similar to the guy in Orlando. I found a counterpart in the UK, similar background, but still teaches the curriculum differently. So, you can buy and sell or borrow ideas from each one and build your own sort of quilt of how I go to market and how I do what I do. But those were really important meetings, all of them, of, get out of your way almost, and offshore things, or off-source or outsource. You can't do everything. A lot of entrepreneurs try to wear 10 hats. That means you're wearing 10 hats poorly, right? Find the 2 or 3 that fit you really well and get the other 7 off your list. Give them to somebody, whether it's the neighbor's kid who needs a job or somebody else that needs a job. If it's, we talk about if it's a $5 or $10 an hour job, make sure someone who makes $5 or $10 an hour or $20 an hour is doing it, not you. You're the owner, you're the CEO. You should be doing things that cost $150 or $200 an hour or more, right? So that's, as a small business owner, some people get sucked into things that don't make them any money. And you've got to be conscious. You've got to really stop yourself from doing those things. Also, there are things that we love to do. Like, I'm a creative guy. I love doing all sorts of creative stuff. I want to build my own website and all, I'm the wrong person to do that stuff. It'll take me 5 times as long. Do I want to do it? Yes. Could I do it? Yes. Would it take me longer? Absolutely. It'll take me longer. Right. So things like that, you have to make executive decisions as your own personal CEO of your business and make sure you're not, down in the mailroom doing mailroom stuff. You have to get out of there. I don't mailroom. Do they even have those anymore?
I don't think they do. Lance, we've come to the end of the episode. I'm going to jump off stage here. I want you to let my audience know where they can connect with you so that they could support you. The floor is yours.
Okay, great. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn anytime, Lance LeFort, or our website is www.leforttalentgroup.com, or just send us the email hello@leforttalentgroup.com. That's it. Thank you very much.
Give me one second. There we go. Lance, thank you so much for being an amazing guest and sharing so much value. I'm really going to look forward to reading over the transcript after this to see all the gold that you dropped in it that I was just maybe missed it because I was just mesmerized by something else you said.
Thanks, Phil. It's a pleasure being here. I really appreciate the time and the talk.
Excellent. To my audience, as you know, check the show notes down below to connect with Mr. Lance LeFort and the LeFort Talent Group. I want to thank you so much for listening, and remember to always invest in yourself.
Thanks for tuning in. Now it's time to take the next step. When you're ready to dive deeper into how to launch, grow, and monetize your podcast, Phil's got something special for you. Join him for a free webinar where he'll reveal the 3 secrets that have helped countless entrepreneurs succeed in podcasting. Click the link in the show notes to save your spot, and let's turn your podcasting dreams into reality.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.